Hey guys, what's up? I'm Ashley and I am here to talk to you about all things A Song of Ice and Fire. In today's video, I will be covering the second installment of my Pink Letter Whodunit series. To get started, I'd like to mention a discussion I had with a friend. After watching the first video from this series, she took issue with my linking the Pink Letter to the death of Jon Snow. Instead, she liked the idea that it was his continued involvement with the wildlings that got him killed. My response is that we were both correct. In the first video, I raised the point that it's possible for the author of the Pink Letter to never have wanted to lure Jon to Winterfell, but instead to have wanted to use the Pink Letter as a pretext for murder. There is a character who has a well-documented history of hating the wildlings. He's growing increasingly angry with Jon's continued efforts to help the wildlings, and he has the perfect means to write this letter. And that man is Bowen Marsh. Bowen Marsh is Lord Steward of the Night's Watch. Commonly referred to as the Old Pomegranate, Bowen once served as Castellan of Castle Black during the Great Ranging, and after Jeor Mormont's death he served as an interim Lord Commander until the Watch held their election. As Lord Steward, Bowen Marsh would have the means to write this letter. At times, stewards can be in charge of letters and ravens, so the Old Pomegranate would have direct access to wax and parchment and maester's ink. During his time as Castellan, Marsh sent out letters to all the kings of the realm requesting their assistance in helping the Watch. This means he interacted with one Tywin Lannister, since Tywin handled Joffrey's matters of state. That will be important down the line, so keep it in mind. Now, in order to be taken seriously and get help from Tywin or the other four kings, it can be assumed that Bowen would know how to write professional-sounding letters. So the Pink Letter would be easy as pie for him to write, based off this past experience. Also, as Lord Steward, Bowen oversees all the other stewards. It is my belief that Bowen Marsh abused his position and forcibly enlisted the help of those in his order to assist him with his plot to murder the Lord Commander. Clytus is the one who delivered the Pink Letter to Jon, and Wick Whittlestick was the first of the mutineers to attack him. And as you can guess, both of these men are stewards. Now, forced collusion is supported by something that Jon notices when he disarms Wick whilst he's being attacked. From A Dance with Dragons, he notes, "This time Jon caught his wrist and bent his arm back until he dropped the dagger. The gangling steward backed away, his hands upraised as if to say, 'Not me, it was not me.'" Now, looking at this, it sounds like Wick was acting like someone who just did a terrible thing that he didn't want to do but was forced to do. And who better than your boss to get you to do shit you don't want to do? Next, I'd like to look at the events immediately preceding the delivery of the Pink Letter and immediately following Jon reading the letter in the Shield Hall. They reek of a setup and support the idea that the Pink Letter is just a pretext for murder. First, when Clytus delivered the Pink Letter, he had an adverse physical reaction, trembling badly and going pale. Now, Clytus had delivered a letter from Ramsay to Jon before, and he was perfectly fine. He wasn't afraid, nor was he reacting physically. So it's logical to assume that Ramsay being the author isn't what scared Clytus about this letter. In my opinion, Clytus was likely afraid and nervous due to knowing that delivering this letter was the start of a murder plot. And in my opinion, he probably was forced into doing this by Bowen. Now, immediately after Jon reads the Pink Letter to the audience in the Shield Hall, he announces his intent to lead a wildling army south and march against Ramsay Bolton. In the craziness that ensued after that announcement, Jon notices that Bowen Marsh and his men were the first to leave. So it appears that Marsh's group stayed just long enough to make sure that the letter served its purpose, then left to start the next phase of their plan. The third phase of the plan involved creating a chaotic diversion to use for cover while they positioned themselves to carry out the assassination. We know this diversion was provoking the giant Woon into a fit, during which Woon ripped a man apart and smashed him against a wall, and it was while trying to calm Woon that they attacked Jon. Now, in my opinion, Woon was provoked. From the time he had got to the wall, up until this point in the story, he hadn't attacked anyone and had displayed a degree of gentleness by bowing to Shireen. So, violently ripping a man apart isn't consistent with his pattern of behavior. And in my opinion, he would had to have been attacked first to respond this violently. John hints that Woon was attacked because he notices that Woon is bleeding from sword cuts he'd taken to his stomach and arm. John also notes that Woon was afraid. The only reason he'd be afraid is if he had been attacked. So, seemingly the pink letter was just a cog in Bowen Marsh's wheel, and John's reaction to the pink letter gave him what he wanted, a license to kill. Next, we have to ask ourselves, why would Bowen Marsh feel compelled to write the pink letter as a pretext for murder? I think there are a few reasons. We know Bowen Marsh has served as both Castellan of Castle Black and interim Lord Commander. The prosperity of the watch would be his foremost concern. After communications with Tywin, Bowen might feel that John's actions are putting the watch in peril by alienating the crown. Growing ever desperate, murder might have been the only way to save the watch in Bowen's eyes. Remember, Bowen Marsh sent a letter to Joffrey requesting the crown send men to the watch. As Hand, Tywin dealt with most of Joffrey's matters of state, so he handled this request. Tywin's response to the old pomegranate was that Joffrey would spare no men while so many rebels and usurpers remained, but that could change, provided the vacant position of Lord Commander was filled by a man his grace deemed suitable, and to say hello to Janos Slynt. In other words, if the Wall wants the crown's help, Janos Slynt had better be elected Lord Commander. Now, not only did Janos lose the election, but he lost to a Stark. This would be the worst possible outcome given the enmity between houses Stark and Lannister. And the fact that said Stark chopped off Janos' head didn't really help the situation. Bowen was likely in complete desperation, thinking the crown would never aid the Night's Watch again. Since the Night's Watch is severely undermanned already, the old pomegranate had to do something to get back in Tywin's good graces. Ironically, Tywin was already dead. Bowen didn't know it though, so he'd feel compelled to act. It's also worth noting that in Tywin's letter, he refers to the other kings as rebels and usurpers. The pink letter refers to Stannis exclusively as false king. If Bowen was influenced by Tywin, it would make sense that he'd think of Stannis as false king, despite his being in the Night's Watch, meaning he's supposed to be neutral. Second, we know Bowen Marsh has an intense hatred for wildlings. During Mance's attack on the Wall, Marsh fought and won a very costly battle against the Weeper and 300 wildlings. By the end, more than 100 Watch brothers had died, and Bowen himself was severely wounded and permanently scarred. So Jon's continued admittance of free folk south of the Wall, combined with his allowing some of them to join the Night's Watch, would have to have been deeply offensive to Bowen, especially considering that one of the free folk Jon planned to let pass was the Weeper, the man whom Bowen had fought against. Third, and along that same ilk, Bowen was weary of the numbers problem the free folk presented. Having a mind for counts and measures, he realized that allowing so many wildlings through was a threat because they'd have enough strength to end the watch in one night. As former Castellan and interim Lord Commander, he could not let that happen. Fourth, the numbers problem manifested itself in another way. Winter is coming, and the watch's food stores were dwindling. Jon was willing to let thousands of free folk pass through the Wall. This meant more mouths to feed, which would in turn cut through the food stores even quicker. It's easy to understand why Bowen would have a problem with this and would be unwilling to let his brothers starve in order to feed their enemies. Putting a permanent end to Jon's decision-making was probably the best way Bowen could save his brothers, since reasoning wasn't working with Jon. So there you have it, 4 reasons why Bowen Marsh was motivated to write the pink letter as a pretext for murder. Now, another possibility we must consider when discussing Marsh's hatred of the free folk is the timing of the letter. It was delivered to Jon while in the presence of Tormund Giantsbane. Presumably, Jon would share its contents with him. Some of those contents would be important to Tormund because it is revealed that Mance is alive and being held captive. And that letter was received a mere hours before Jon's big meeting in the Shield Hall. He read the letter aloud, sharing it with everyone there. The free folk were heavy in attendance, outnumbering the Watch brothers 5-1. Now again, the parts of the letter about Mance being alive and held prisoner would be of utmost importance to the free folk. As could be expected, upon learning that their king is alive, the free folk went nuts. Then John announces he will ride for Winterfell and make Ramsay answer for his words. He says he won't ask his brothers to betray their vows, but does invite the free folk to come with him, which they unanimously agree to do. Now I have to wonder if this was Bowen's goal. Having the letter delivered while John was in the presence of the closest thing the free folk have to a leader, just before he meets with an audience of predominantly free folk, is kinda suspicious. Was it always Bowen's intent to write the letter to solve his wildling problem? John is known for being honorable, so it is predictable that if John went to Winterfell, he would turn to the free folk so as not to bring dishonor to his brothers. The free folk marching with John would be the only way to get them to leave the wall without it coming to bloodshed. Having a mind for counts and measures, Bowen would have to know that forcibly removing the free folk isn't an option. The letter also erroneously pronounces Stannis as dead. Perhaps Bowen was trying to kill two birds with one stone, since the remainder of Stannis' troops present the same problems that the wildlings did. Proclaiming their king as dead might inspire the Queensmen to march south and avenge their fallen leader. If this happened, most of Bowen's problems would be solved. Now, after all this, you'd think that the old pomegranate would have enough reason to kill John. However, most of these things can be linked back to Stannis. It was his idea originally to admit the wildlings to the realm. John only expanded upon what Stannis had started. So Bowen needed John to do something that the rest of the Watch would see as entirely John's doing. Enter the pink letter. John's actions subsequent to receiving the letter were more than enough to justify Bowen's plans. Last and certainly not least, Bowen writing the letter also explains some miscellaneous details. Things like Stannis Baratheon's sword being magic. While at the wall, Melisandre put on a show designed to showcase the sword as Lightbringer, so naturally Bowen would know that it's supposedly magic. The existence of Val and the existence of Mance's baby. Val lives at the wall, the baby lives at the wall, Bowen lives at the wall. That's self-explanatory. The author of the letter also claims that the false king's friends are dead and that their heads were upon the walls of Winterfell. But there's a huge problem with that. Ramsay doesn't behead the people he kills, he flays them, then displays the full flayed body, still bleeding, upon pikes. The pink letter never mentioned that the heads were flayed, nor that the false king's friends were flayed at all, and that's a pretty significant detail to get wrong. For all we know, Bowen has been at the wall for Ramsay's entire life. It would make sense then that he'd get this detail wrong. He'd have no way to know what Ramsay does to people he kills, so he'd just have to guess. Now that we've examined all the reasons why it makes sense that Bowen Marsh wrote the pink letter, I feel it's only fair that we look at the reasons why he wouldn't have written the pink letter. He would have no way to know about Reek. He'd have no way to know that Melisandre did not burn Mance, that she sent Mance to Winterfell to rescue Jon's sister, or how many spear wives he took with him to help him out. Now, I did raise the possibility that Bowen Marsh could have written the pink letter as a peaceful way to resolve the population problem at the wall. And that would have been a rather genius idea on his part if Bowen hadn't effed it all up and killed Jon. Think about it. If Bowen had just let Jon go, he would have either died in battle or stayed at Winterfell to reclaim his ancestral seat. Jon would take the free folk with him, and they too would either die in battle or stay at Winterfell with Jon. Returning to the wall without the person who wanted them there in the first place would be kind of ridiculous. But alas, Marsh was not smart enough to see the opportunity right in front of him, and he effed it all up. So, while I think it makes a lot of sense that the pink letter fits into the scheming that Bowen was doing, I don't actually think that he wrote it. I think instead the pink letter just served as a very happy coincidence which allowed him to go ahead with plans he already had. So, if not Ramsay and if not Bowen, then who? You'll recall I raised the idea that somebody who stood to gain from John's presence at Winterfell might have written the pink letter. I do believe there is one person, and I will be discussing him in my next video. So, if you're interested in learning my take on that, be on the lookout, like, and subscribe. 7 blessings, everyone!